Hello, I'm filming today from our third house sit in Oaxaca, Mexico, but this video is going to be about our experience with our first house sit. So we're obviously new to house sitting. We're on our third one, and we have a total of 6 booked, which is going to cover back to back a little bit over half the year. And the questions that I get asked the most so far are just general questions about what the house was like, where it was at, and then specifically, how did we come across the house sitting opportunity? So this particular house sit was on a big, beautiful ranch outside of the small town of Aculco. It's located in the state of Mexico, but it's right on the border of the state of Guanajuato as well. The house itself was set up like a full ranch. They have 3 horses, a herd of sheep, and a flock of chickens. The house has enough room in it that it has 4 separate living areas, so the owners could stay there along with the full-time ranch hand and some guests, and everyone would have their own private living space inside the ranch. And the scenery was absolutely beautiful. We came across the opportunity. I had been posting um, about house sitting in 2 Facebook groups. One is House Sitting Mexico, and one is Homesteading Mexico. I can't remember which group the ranch owner responded to me from, but I just posted the same, just little blurb about ourselves. We had 2 weeks open between the end of our road trip, where we would be in Mexico City, and then what at that time was going to be our first house sit in Guanajuato. We had a 2-week gap. So I just thought, hey, I'm going to post in these groups and say I have these dates available. I'm going to be in the Mexico City area. Does anybody need any house sitting during that time? Well, the ranch owner wrote to me and said, what about staying on a ranch? Do you want to come stay on our ranch? And what makes this house sit different than the typical house sit, even though it was our first one, it started out being just not your average house sit, because I said, well, you have a full-time ranch hand, so us staying on your ranch, what benefits can we give you in exchange for staying there? And he said that he liked what we'd written about our homestead in New Orleans, and he thought we had some good experience, and he wanted us to do like a work exchange and idea exchange, which I thought was great. So specifically, he wanted some work done on his chicken coop, and he also just wanted to talk about some ideas that they have for the ranch for the future. And they were super friendly. We spent quite a bit of time just talking with them about their ideas, and then they wanted to hear our ideas, like if it was our place, what would we do with it, and just sort of a back and forth like that. So with the horses, sheep, and chickens, they're trying to come up with ideas to make the ranch self-sustainable. They've owned it for sometime between 1 and 2 years, so they're ready to work towards that. And they said their biggest expense was the horse feed, so they're working on growing that themselves, and then they want in the future to also grow some other crops. So at first getting the ranch self-sustainable, and then getting it to the point where it's generating an income. And then further in the future, they were thinking along the lines of agritourism, or making it like a retreat, which is super interesting and right up our alley, and it sounds a lot like what we want to do in the future. So it was great to be there. It was after just a whirlwind of a road trip, and then a week in super metropolitan Mexico City. It was great to just be absolutely in the middle of nowhere for 2 weeks, hanging out with some chickens. And so speaking of the chicken coop, needed a lot of work, and they knew that, and they said, you know, this is our chicken coop. and basically gave us free rein to do what we wanted during those 2 weeks to fix up the coop for them. So we started out by talking about what their future ideas were for their chickens. They want to do eggs, and they currently have 7 hens and 1 rooster, and they want to expand eventually to around 20 hens. They said would be about their max. So taking that information, then we spent some time observing their flock. And initial observations, the chickens were very happy. The coop needed a lot of work, but the chickens themselves were very happy. They didn't have any pecking order issues. The rooster to hen ratio was good. There was no missing feathers or any other warning signs there. They were all in good health, despite being somewhat rescue hens. They came from a program from the government, and there's a lot of signs that tell me that they were a little older. They're Leghorns. 3 of them had cut beaks, and 1 of them had leg mites. And all of these things put together, I highly suspect that they came from like a factory farming situation. So they're from a large farm standpoint, they're considered retirement age hens. But as we all know, Leghorns have many more years of good health and laying a lot of eggs left in them after they're considered unusable by the larger farms. So technically they're rescue hens, and they were, besides the few things I mentioned, in very good health. The coop itself, to explain what the coop needed, it basically needed to be simplified, it needed security, and sanitation. It was actually 4 rooms, so there was 1 long skinny coop, a 2nd long skinny coop, and then 2 square rooms. And what that does is it confuses the hens and it breaks up the flock. And it also needs simplified in the sense that there was just a lot of extra stuff in the coop and a lot of like spiky things that could be a danger. If they stepped on them, could cause bumblefoot, or it could scratch them or hurt their eyes. The security, the coop had a full walls and ceiling of chicken wire, but the walls weren't secured at the bottom, so something could crawl through the bottom, and also the door just didn't close and it was always open. So no matter how secure your coop is, if your door doesn't close, that's just a gaping hole. And the sanitation is that they had no sort of bedding on the floor. What they had going for them is that it was a super dry climate. So the chicken droppings, they dry out and turn into little hard rocks within a day. But the area underneath their roosts where they nested every night, it was just, it was pretty deep of just chicken droppings and nothing. So we decided to simplify it majorly, clean everything up, take off all the sharp edges, and do the deep leaf bedding method for them. I also took it upon myself to work with the hens themselves and get them from being free-range egg layers all over the yard and in the doghouse to laying in their nesting boxes, which just meant a little bit of training with the hens and just making their nests inviting and comfortable. And here we are looking at the coop. You can see there's 3 doors. There's actually 2 different structures. One structure we took down completely, and the other structure we simplified quite a bit. This is the inside of the coop that we kept and transformed. You can see a lot of extra things around. The stump, there's a lot of just sharp wires and curled up chicken wire. This is the inside of the coop that we took down. And this is an example of the flock being split up and some of the confusion that causes. So there's a hallway running between the two buildings here, and you can see the hen on the left, the hens in the middle, and then the hens on the right. They would get confused about how to actually get to each other and return to a complete flock altogether, which is the way that chickens like to roam, is with everyone nearby. This is the nesting boxes that were completely unused. One hen would go in the nesting box, but she would just nap in there, and there was no egg laying happening in the nesting boxes. This is another view of all the different coops and all the confusion. This door on the left was always propped open like that, and one of the sheep would butt his way in every day and eat a bunch of their chicken food. So that's just one of the major problems right there. Another view of all the different structures. This lady in front was the nicest hen. She was the only one I got to eat out of my hand while we were there. This is a view from the inside of the coop that we kept, and you can see that the ceiling is falling down, and they're covered in tarps, which kept them dry, but is also a problem. And this is a back view of the coops here. You can see on the left the door that goes to the only separate room that we decided to keep, and I'll explain that a little later. And this is the flock roosting. So even though their coop needed a lot of work, they were happy. They did roost in the coops. They picked a different coop every night, and it took them about an hour of going back and forth, where half the flock would be in one coop and half would be in the other, and it took them a long time to get everyone into whichever coop they decided they were going to sleep in that night. But they were happy ladies, and they're healthy. So, all the work that we're doing on this coop, I don't want this video to sound like, it was a bad situation. So here we see the ladies roosting in their before coop. Good morning. Here we are at the coop. We finished our first day of work yesterday, and before we start our second day of work, we wanted to take a minute to show you everything that we did in one day. We started yesterday by removing everything out of the coop. That includes things that we didn't intend to use in the redesign, but also everything that we did intend to use so it could be sanitized before going back in. So we started by scooping out all of everything on the ground. So that includes chicken poop and anything that might have mites on it. We carted that off. We removed the roosts, a lot of just unnecessary things that were in the coop. We could tell that the coop had been remodeled a number of times over the years, so there was all kinds of just wires poking around everywhere that they'd used for either repair jobs or just various adjustments to the coop, and a lot of them were just hanging there and sort of a danger to either our own eyeballs or I've scraped myself a few times on sharp objects, so that would also be a danger to the chickens since they are such accident-prone animals. After we got everything out, we secured the base of the perimeter. So there was one row of these bricks here before. We reattached the chicken wire to the outside bricks, and we added a row of bricks on the inside to sandwich the chicken wire in between and make them nice and secure. We also took down this, there was an interior wall here that we removed, and when we removed it there was a ridge in the ground. So we intend to do the deep bedding method with all the leaves that we're going to rake up, so that will help level out the ground, but we just did a quick leveling of the ground to get rid of that hard ridge that was in the dirt there. And we did a pass through the whole perimeter, just double checking that nothing can get in, fixing any holes, and we got a staple gun, so we went through and are in the process of stapling down any sharp edges, as well as the staples will add more protection for predators in the future. And lastly, the top of the coop is good for hawk protection and predator proofing, but the chicken wire was sagging pretty low, so since they will need to be going inside to collect the eggs and you want it to be a comfortable experience, we were originally going to add some more of these wood posts to raise the chicken wire back up, but we ended up going with the method that it looks like they had used previously, which was just attaching wire to the chicken wire and then lifting it up by attaching the other end of the wire to the tree branches above. So that was day one. Getting everything out, starting with a blank slate, taking out the wall that we didn't need, taking out this door that we didn't need because we're going to turn it into a wall, and reinforcing the perimeter. Okay, going back to some photos here. This is some of the midway process. As I said in the video, first we pulled everything out for sanitizing. Here we are clipping off the pokey bits and cleaning things up. Here we're taking out the center of the wall that I mentioned in the last video. Making progress here. Here's Ev doing some pruning as well as raising the ceiling. Here it is all cleaned out. A blank canvas. And this was the flock's first inspection of our work, which I think they were happy with. As I mentioned, one of the hens has leg mites, and again, I don't suspect in any way that the leg mites are due to any sort of mistreatment from the ranch owners. I had never personally seen leg mites before, but I'd done a lot of reading about them in my research about potential chicken parasites and things to look out for, and this was in a very advanced stage of leg mites. So I honestly do not believe it would have been possible for her leg mites to get to this advanced stage had she not brought them from wherever it was that she lived prior to this ranch. She was, as far as I could tell, the only one that had leg mites. You can see that her little legs there, she's a Leghorn, so she has very thin legs, look like tree trunks, which is what gave it away. This is a closer look at her feet, and the way that leg mites work is the tiny mites crawl underneath their scales, and through the course of their life cycle, which takes place 100% underneath the chicken's scales, they create garbage and all kinds of things that build up over time, and the various generations of mites that all live underneath the leg's scales, eventually all that garbage pushes the scales up, so they're sticking out instead of being flat like a suit of armor and actually protecting the chicken like they're supposed to. So you can see how advanced this is, and you can imagine how many generations of mites living under her scales it would have taken to get to this point. The treatment for leg mites involves, well, there's a number of treatments. The treatment option that we chose involves soaking the legs in warm soapy water for a minimum of 15 minutes. This isn't going to get rid of the mites on its own, but what that does is it helps soften the hard scales just a little bit, um, so it accepts the treatment easier, as well as based on the hen's response to soaking her legs in her tiny hot tub, it definitely gives her some relief. She actually seemed to really enjoy the leg soak as well as the next step of the treatment, which is covering her legs in Vaseline. What a cute hen. And she let me work a little bit of the gunk out from underneath her scales, um, which again will just help the healing process, which actually takes up to a year to complete. The second step after soaking is to smother their legs in Vaseline. This is going to literally suffocate the mites. So the treatment involves doing this at least 2 times, at least 10 days apart, which we did. The first time you're going to kill the mites that are currently alive under her scales. The second round of treatment is going to kill the eggs that have inevitably turned into mites in that 10 to 14 days. So you do it twice, and that's going to actually stop the life cycle. So we are hoping that's the case. Unfortunately, with treating leg mites, it's not something that you're immediately rewarded and seeing visible results. The damaged ones will fall off and be replaced by healthy new leg scales. Here we are starting work day 3, so our wrap up for what we did yesterday. We started by sanitizing everything that we had taken out of the coop before anything went back in. So we sanitized everything we intend to reuse, sanitized the coop, and we also did the one hen's leg mite treatment. She did really well for that. Then moving back on to continuing the coop remodel, we finished replacing this door with a wall in front, and Evan built this nice rock wall. I went through with the staple gun and we got all of the sharp edges stapled down, cut off, taken care of, so there shouldn't be any issues for people or chickens. And got their nesting boxes fixed up and moved over here. One last batch of progress photos. This was from our final work day. You can see we almost have all the leaves moved in for the deep bedding method. I won't go into the deep bedding method because you can find plenty of YouTube videos about it. We swear by it. When we started the deep bedding method on our coop in New Orleans, it solved so many problems. The very short version is that the brown matter in the leaves combined with the nitrogen of the chicken droppings basically completely eliminates the odor. Also, the chickens constantly tilling the leaves is going to make their heavy droppings fall to the bottom. So then when they walk on top of the leaves, it just makes them come into contact with their droppings that much less, which obviously is going to lead to better health. Here you can see one lady hiding in her new favorite nesting spot behind the rock. Another new favorite spot, training the ladies. Our next video will be completely about the nesting box training progress. Here we have almost all of the leaves in place. You can see their new roost is in the back as well as a little roosting toy. And real quick, I want to touch on the food there. The ranch owner took us to the farm store with him so we could look at all their different options. And because 3 of their hens, as I mentioned, are rescues and have cut beaks, we got the biggest pieces that we could. I was surprised that this farm store had maybe 30 different options for chicken feed. None of them were the big pellets that we're used to in the US. So I don't know if that's a Mexico-wide thing or if it was just in this area. But we got the biggest pellets that we could, which were quite a bit larger than the feed that they'd had before. And if you've never seen a chicken with a cut beak, this is what these 3 hens looked like. Obviously, this is an awful practice done on large farms, but these ranchers are kind enough that they have taken these hens that essentially have special needs. So you can imagine a chicken beak is usually very sharp and um, able to pick up tiny pieces like a chopstick. And when you cut off the sharp part, it's then very difficult to get small pieces. So the larger pieces, we could tell immediately the 3 ladies that had cut beaks were very appreciative for that. Here they are roosting. This is a picture of the third version of our new chicken door that latches and closes tight. And the bars across the center there are because the sheep still insisted on coming inside to eating their chicken food. So now you have a person-sized door, a chicken-sized door, and a sheep barricade. Here is an overview of the whole new coop. You can see their area here is L-shaped, and then they have that extra room in the back that can be used for various things. Looks quite a bit better. Here we are, last day of the coop. We've done everything that we set out to do. You can see they're all voluntarily hanging out in the coop right now, and that sound tells me that someone just laid an egg, so they're also enjoying their new nesting area. So we're sorry to say goodbye to these chickens, but we are happy to leave them with a much better coop than when they started. And we also have room for expansion with the other room in the back that could be used for various things, either potentially baby chickens or a quarantine area, or they've talked about using it for other things. So all in all, we're just happy to have had this opportunity to work with these chickens and help fix up their coop. If you've made it this far, thanks for sticking around. I know this video went a little bit on the long side, but we had a lot of information to cover from our first house sit, which again was a very atypical house sit with all of the work exchange. And I know that this audience for our Benton Homestead page, based on the audience interaction that we've had thus far on our Facebook and Instagram, you're really interested in the chicken aspect and the farming and all of that. So I thought that you would really find this information useful. Please, any sort of feedback that you have. We're obviously very new to making videos, and I know this one was a little bit ramshackled, and hopefully we'll get some sort of process streamlined for our future videos. But any feedback, any comments, suggestions, things you'd like to see, questions you have about house sitting, homesteading, farming, Mexico, living abroad in general, anything like that, please let us know. We have a number of more months at least house sitting, so we have a lot of time to be working on photos and videos and that sort of thing, and we'd really like to cater it towards exactly what it is that y'all would like to see. So thank you again. Please like, subscribe, and share, and give us any feedback you'd like.